you're making over $500,000 a year. I think franchising is probably the most overlooked path to wealth creation in America. It's super accessible. The revenues are high. The cost to get in is low. You can get going in less than 30 days.
Okay.
I like to go fast.
How are people out there buying franchises with none of their own money?
There's an express loan where you can get $500,000 in less than 60 days.
Wow. What would you say is the cheapest franchise concept that you would put your own money into right now?
Garage renovation business. They do like epoxied floors, custom shelving with slat board and stuff. The average revenue is over $1 million. No heavy equipment. There's clearly a ton of demand and not a lot of supply.
Is Subway the worst franchise deal in America? Defend your answer. My friend Alex knows more about how to get wealthy from franchising than almost anyone on this planet. So today, I flew him here to Dallas, Texas, to ask him what franchises can I get into with a very low startup cost and a very high profit potential? What should we look out for in a franchise that appears to be legit but is actually shady? Which franchises are fads? Which are the next big thing? What are some overlooked franchises that are making people millionaires? And specifically, what are the 4 best franchise opportunities in the world right now? Okay. I have in my notes here, freight brokerage franchise.
Yep. So the first one I brought is a really interesting business. It's in the freight brokerage category, which essentially is you in an office. It could be at your house. It could be a small office where you're helping people that want to move goods, pairing them with carriers that have trucks and logistics and routes, et cetera. And then you're making the spread on what that vendor is willing to pay to move their items and what the supplier is willing to charge for moving those items. Okay. And so you make the difference. It's really B2B sales. So it doesn't cost a lot to get into this, but some of these individuals are putting up really big numbers. Let me pull exactly what the average is. So the average franchisee in this business is doing over $1 million a year in revenue. And this is a mature UK and Europe-based concept that's moving to the US for the first time. They're actually headquartered here in Dallas.
Okay. So you say $1 million a year in revenue. That's not like an industry-wide statistic. This is for this franchisor.
This brand specifically.
Okay.
Yep.
So you don't need an office. The franchise doesn't require you to have an office. You can work from home. You're on the phone a lot, emails. It's a relationship business, I'm assuming. Once you get in with a good company, then they're probably going to send you a bunch of shipments on a regular basis.
Yep, and they've built all the tech, the back end. They help with the carriers. They help you with initial customers. And that's where things get a little complicated. It's like, how do you price things and how do you do that? A lot of these independent freight brokerages build this in-house. It's a lot of money, software engineers, et cetera. And so they provide all of that. The kicker, though, is they do charge one of the highest royalties that I've seen in franchising outside of Chick-fil-A even. Or Chick-fil-A is the highest. They're up there. They charge 30% royalty on the gross margin, not on the revenue.
Okay.
And this is actually common in freight brokeraging for a number of reasons because of all the investment into technology and the relationships are pretty defensible.
Okay, so let's break that down. Let's say that there's a shipment from, Los Angeles to Seattle, and it's a $10,000 shipment. Break that number down. Where does all the money go there?
Yep. So you'll make about a 40-ish% margin on the 10, let's say, was it 10,000? 10,000. So you'll make $4,000. Then the franchisor is taking 30% of that $4,000.
$1,200.
So they'll take $1,200. The rest is left for you to cover any local expenses you have if you do rent an office, if you have decided to start scaling and hire more sales reps, more account executives. That cash would be left for them. Otherwise, you're pocketing the rest if it's just you and a home office.
Okay.
Your cost of goods in this freight brokerage example on the 10K is $6,000 in cost. So you're left with $4,000. The franchisor is taking 30% of that.
Yeah. Okay. And presumably it's because your overhead's not that high, right? Whereas with a restaurant, that 30% might be 8%. And I'm hoping and assuming that they help you find customers.
Yes.
Because if I'm a franchisor and I take such a fee, it's going to be because I'm feeding them leads all day. Good
leads, and then all the technology, and they are handling all of the back office. They're running all of your invoicing, carrier payments, carrier relationships. Really, you're just effectively B2B sales.
Yeah. Okay. I have to think that since this is a relationship business, the churn is pretty low. Like once you have a good relationship,
it's recurring revenue essentially.
Yeah.
And you can upsell into warehouse management, facility management, other services that carriers and buyers need alike.
Okay.
So the average revenue is a little over 1 million across all the different open territories today. and then the average margin is about 40%. So you're making 400K in gross margin before you pay that 30% royalty.
Wow. Okay. So net margin would be 30% less, 400 grand? Is that right?
Yeah. So take 120K off, you're at 280K
Okay.
average.
28% net margin. Some are significantly lower, some might be significantly more.
Yep. It depends on what your local operating costs are. If you've got a nice office and you got a team of 6, I imagine the average isn't that big yet. Those are probably the top quartile performers, and they're in the multiple millions, making a lot more that justify adding headcount in an office.
Because if you have a team of 6, your percentage margins are probably going to be lower, but your
volume.
Yeah, your volume will be higher. Your net revenue to your pocket will be higher.
Yep.
All right, what do you got next?
The second one is also really interesting. This is one of the highest revenue generating franchises that I've seen, and it's commercial facility management. So think about office buildings, warehouses, all these different properties. Let's say you and I own a bunch of them together. We now have to deal with landscaping and HVACs going out and janitorial services and striping the parking lot and all these things that come with owning a property. This franchise or this business handles all that. It's one, for lack of a better word, one throat to choke. It's one relationship, and they handle everything else for you. And they make a very, very, very high volume of revenue. The highest grossing revenue franchisee in 2025 in their FDD did over $50 million in revenue. And the average is doing $9 million in revenue.
Holy crap. For the franchisee, not the franchise.
The franchisee.
Did you say facilities management? How is that different than being a commercial property manager?
It's effectively the same thing. You're just handling, I mean, I guess even property managers are handling the whole thing. You're effectively being the property manager for the building, but it's a franchise model instead of an independently owned.
So you're also finding tenants and evicting.
You're not doing that. It's actually just the, it's just the maintenance.
So I guess that would be the differentiator then. It's kind of an unbundled version of a property manager.
Yeah, you don't have to deal with leasing up the units and working with tenants that way.
Okay. We'll make sure that an extra dumpster gets out there, that the lines get striped, etc.
Yep.
Hey, believe it or not, about 62% of you don't actually subscribe to this channel, even though you see my videos in your feed. So just take a second, hit the subscribe button, maybe even the notification bell, and it would mean the world to me. You said 6 million was the average?
9 million is the average revenue.
And what are the net margins on that?
So their gross margin is a little over 3. It's 3.3 million average margin. So 33.5% margin off of an average of 9.8 million. It's almost 10 million in average revenue.
Holy crap.
And my guess is that, again, it's almost like this GMV thing. So you hear with like Instacart, they're doing billions of dollars in revenue. Well, they're just transacting billions of dollars of groceries. Instacart's taking a membership fee or some smaller amount. My guess is the revenue is so high here because they're saying, hey, we're charging for janitorial, landscaping, et cetera. They're having to pay those
capturing that revenue and then passing it on.
Because even the royalty is on gross sales, not margin, but I imagine that 65% that's going out the door is to the subcontractors. And so you're still left with a lot. And you probably don't have a lot of overhead or costs at that point because you're outsourcing every bit of the services actually happening.
Do you know how much like lead generation the franchisor provides on this one?
This one is more on you, and they charge a lot less of a royalty as a result. So it's 5% of gross sales is the royalty.
Okay. Are they going to help you find and vet like the line striper,
So that's on you too. So that's where I think as the franchisee, you're getting a brand. They're helping with some brand awareness and marketing. They probably have national tenant or landlord relationships with some of the large property owners. But from there, they exclusively say, or they specifically say in the FDD, you are responsible for building the subcontractor relationship. So that's where the rub is, probably the headache of running this business is I got to go find good contractors. But for 3 million in gross margin, and a pretty good business, worth the headache.
I mean, any given franchise is a terrible fit for someone and an amazing fit for someone else, right? So I'm thinking if you're a 40 to 60-year-old dude that's been doing real estate for a while, either commercial or residential, you've got a bunch of contractors in your back pocket, you have relationships, you speak the language, you could plug into a bunch of stuff, you're a leasing agent, this could be a great fit for you.
Yeah.
If you have no experience there and you're going in cold, you have no sales experience, it could be a terrible fit.
Yeah, I asked too, why are the top 5, why are some of these folks doing 50 million? And they said the main differentiator is that they've had 5 years of B2B sales experience before joining as a franchisee. It's fundamentally a sales leadership business.
Okay. So that's the other type of person, B2B sales. Work from home, You don't need an office to do this? Okay. And you can hire as needed. You don't need to start with employees.
Yep.
Okay. Oil filtration.
Yeah, so this one changes, turn a little bit here. The first two were more B2B. You can do it in your comfort of your own home. So oil filtration, if you think about all these restaurants, there's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of QSRs, restaurants in the United States.
Quick serve restaurants, right?
Yep, quick service restaurants. So those are like your McDonald's, your Bojangles, Burger King, etc. But there's also restaurants that just have, fryers and oil. They have to do something with that oil. They can't keep reusing it over and over and over. And so this concept has a proprietary truck that comes on site. They run a hose into the building through the back door, and they filter that oil on site. So they clean it, they pull out the gross chunks and things, and they actually put different chemicals into it to cleanse it and make it more useful again. They'll do full-blown replacement of the oil as well, and they'll take that unusable oil and they'll sell it to other people that can use it in different businesses.
Like biofuel or?
Correct.
Okay. So sorry, let me make sure I understand this correct. Does this remove the need for a restaurant to have that nasty pit in the back where they dump all the oil?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah. So like they're coming and they're taking it out and removing it from the site entirely, or they're cleaning it on site. They're pumping it into their vehicle, running it through their proprietary process, and then putting it back into the
filtering it.
Yeah.
So I'm just picturing a big, kind of like my kids' aquarium. They have this big filter that sits outside of it with two tubes. Right? Yep. One of it sucks all the dirty water out, and then the other one spits all the clean water back in.
1,000%.
They're doing that with oil. Or if the oil is just too far gone, they're just taking it, putting it in a tank, taking it to a different facility, recycling it, selling it as biofuel or whatever, and replacing it with clean stuff.
So there's multiple revenue streams. There's the recycling on site. There's the full pull resell over here. So I'm taking what you think is trash to you as the restaurant owner, and I'm making money on it. And then I'm selling you new oil. So I've made money twice here in this instance that you're happy and thrilled about. And then they also do full drain cleaning and replacement. So they start to get into some of the equipment, and then they also do refrigeration and freezer cleaning and maintenance as well.
What about like hood and vent cleaning?
They don't do that yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if they start to. So they have 4 or 5 revenue streams now.
Yeah. I mean, once you get your foot in the door of a small business and they like you, you might as well keep adding more.
And it's recurring again because this has to happen on a certain frequency and cycle.
And people don't understand, like there's 30,000 McDonald's, but there's like, 500,000 no-name mom and pop restaurants.
Yeah, just in franchising alone, there's about 1 million retail locations open. 400,000-ish are food.
Wow.
And that's just franchising. So to your point, however many one-off Alex and Chris's Rib Shack or whatever it is out, there's 2 to 3 times more of those.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so this is also probably relationship. Well, it's heavy on sales.
Yep.
It's highly recurring as long as you don't screw it up. I have a friend that does this business. He doesn't own a franchise. He's ran it for 20 years. He also does hood and vent cleaning. He does like Panda Express, and he has like, probably like franchisors that have multi-units, and he does really well. I know he does well. He founded it himself, but any concept that works as a standalone, not any, but I would say most concepts would also work as a franchise.
Yeah.
This is no exception. Okay, so what are the revenue numbers, the profit numbers, and the fees that the franchisor takes?
Yep. So this one's lower revenue. It's $517,000 in revenue for one territory.
And that's average?
That's the average.
Okay.
As soon as you start doing multiple territories, so in a route-based business like this, they're giving you either a radius or a set of zip codes or a set of households in a certain polygon again. So for one territory, which they draw 517,000. As soon as you get into multi-territory, the average goes to a little over 1.5 million.
Okay.
And I think part of that has to do with, again, you're using the same equipment base for the most part. You might maybe adding trucks, but you're getting to upsell those 4 or 5 different revenue streams to an exponential number of different businesses. And so you start to get more leverage out of the existing assets that you already have in those trucks because you're servicing a wider range.
Economies of scale.
Yep.
Do you know how many units or territories they have in the U.S. today?
They have a lot. Let me pull up the exact number. This one's been around for a while. They were also founded in the UK, but they've been in the US since 2002, and they have 377 territories across 119 franchisees.
Okay.
So that means the average franchisee has 3.2 territories.
Okay. Any idea how saturated this is? Like how many territories are left for these guys? They seem further along than the other two.
They're further along. They're actively trying to grow. They're growing every year. I think they have room for another couple hundred territories. A lot of mature brands, as you mentioned, McDonald's, granted it's retail, 30,000 locations. This one's servicing a wider radius. It's going to be less than 30,000, but it's definitely more than 377.
Yeah. On the three we've talked about so far, if we were to make a scale of like a brand new franchise with 0 territories, that's a 1. And a 10 would be like a Subway or McDonald's. That's very mature. Crumbl would be like an 8 or a 9.
Yeah.
Right? Where would you put all three of these so far?
Yep. So the freight brokerage, I would put them at a 6 or a 7 overall because they have such a presence in the UK and Europe.
US,
in the US, 2 or 3.
Okay.
Yeah. It's new. They don't have as much of a presence here. There isn't a national brand yet in franchising for freight brokerage in the United States. And I think they have a good shot at being the first. So that one earlier, emerging, more risk comes with that. The second one is the facilities management concept. They've been around forever. They started out doing just janitorial, and they've added all these other services on. They've been around since I think 1961. So 100 plus units already open, sold, profitable, high revenue numbers. I would give them more of a 8 or 9.
Okay.
So less risky, more proven, longer tenured, more established.
Yeah. I want you to do something right now. Open your bank statement and add up every single software subscription that you're paying for. Your CRM, your email marketing tool, text message platform, calendar booking app, funnel builder, review management, even a separate form builder or automation tool. I've talked to business owners paying $500 to $3,000 a month across 8 or 10 different tools, and half of them don't even talk to each other. So then they go pay for Zapier on top of that just to make things connect. High Level replaces all of it. CRM, email, SMS, funnels, websites, calendars, automations, reputation management, invoicing. One login, one dashboard, one bill, starting at $97 a month. A guy in my community was paying $347 just for ClickFunnels, $99 for MailChimp, $25 for Calendly, $79 for a review tool, and $49 for Zapier just to glue it all together. That's $600 a month if you're not counting. He moved everything to High Level and cut his software costs by over 80%. But the best part isn't even the savings. It's that everything just works together natively. A lead fills out a form on your funnel. That creates a contact in your CRM, which triggers a text and email sequence, books an appointment on your calendar, and then asks for a review when the job's done. One workflow, 0 duct tape, and then you can white label the whole platform to resell it to other businesses as your own software. Charge them $200 to $500 a month. Check out gohighlevel.com/TKOpod. They'll give you a 30-day free trial to see what I mean.
The third one, same thing. They've been around since the early 2000s in the United States, since 1960, I think, in the UK, 1996, sorry, in the UK, and then 2002 in the US.
Okay.
So probably another 7 or an 8 there.
Okay. Is there like a right number to get in with a franchise?
So that's an interesting question because it comes down to your unique risk tolerance. So when people ask me like, well, which one would you buy? Because I just want to buy that. You look at all these, I'm like, well, my answer is going to be way different. I have a much higher appetite for risk than most people do inherently. And so like, I couldn't work at a Chick-fil-A, even though Chick-fil-A will pay me $600 to $800 a year in profit. Amazing job. It's a job.
Yeah.
You're less of a business owner, in my opinion.
It's great
but
money.
Some people would love, that's a 10 out of 10. They've been doing it forever. They got this thing down. They are all the way dialed in.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to do that, even though the money's great and it's proven. I like getting in at these like 3s or 4s because I have more upside. Because sometimes you can get equity, you can invest in the business, the franchisor. You have way more white space to develop, way more territories than Chick-fil-A. I can only get one of them. And so like I like the idea of empire building and scaling to a 10 plus unit portfolio. I'm developing 10 pop-up bagels right now.
I think you told me that.
Yeah. So like I like that. It's an early brand, but lots of promise and upside and big, well-known investors behind them and a great executive team. So I like that kind of stage. So to answer your question of like, is there a right number? I tell people if you're more risk averse, try to find a system that has more than 50 units already open. 50 units is usually like that magic number.
If you have to choose a number, 50
is it. Because the brand is now royalty profitable and sufficient. So they have less of a need to just sell units to anyone who can get into the business and be an operator.
Yeah.
So they're much more selective on the operators that they pick.
That's a good point.
And they're less dependent on franchise fees out of the gate to fund that early growth before they get to profitability on the royalty side. Yeah. And so once they've done 50, they've seen a number of things. They've been in different markets. They've probably made the mistakes they need to on marketing and lead gen and all these other things. Still not perfect, but early enough that you can get in and still have a say and enough white space and upside. Not so late that you're purely buying a job.
Yeah. Because from what I understand, those first 50 or whatever territories, they're not self-sustaining. Like they're relying on those upfront fees to pay the bills. But you're saying they get to a magical point where their percentage fees over time cover their overhead and then start to become profitable.
Yes.
And then they're in a luxurious position to make better decisions.
Yep.
Whereas for those first few franchisees, they probably have to make some compromises
Yep.
that they wouldn't have made at number 51 or
There's this chart, and I'm going to maybe butcher this a little bit, but it's on one axis, it's the franchisor's value, and then what you get as a franchisee over time on the x-axis. On the y, it's the cost of the value. So at first, the franchisor is providing a ton of value, but they're getting nothing from the franchisee in the form of royalties because you're starting at zero, no revenue, there's nothing coming in. Over time, the value the franchisor provides starts to decline, but the value that you're paying, the money that you're paying them in royalties, they intersect eventually at one point. And so 5 years in, you as a franchisee start to forget all that value that you got, didn't really pay anything for. And you're like, why am I doing this? I'm 6 years in, I know what I'm doing. I'm an expert at this oil business or whatever it is. But the franchisor has front-loaded so much of that value. This happens a lot in systems that franchisees need to ask the question, hey, what are you doing for me lately, franchisor? And that's where lead gen and national brand campaigns and investment in technology that you and I as an oil filtration franchisee might not be building homegrown AI agentic technology to make our lives and workflows and whatever easier, but the franchisor is.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I heard a story about a guy who signed up for a franchise, and it was a good franchise, well-known, got in over his head and told them like, hey, I'm struggling. Can I sell this back to you? And they're like, no. And then they were like, he's like, I might have to declare bankruptcy. And they were like, can you give us that in writing? And he's like, yeah, I guess. So he did. And they're like, okay, thank you. We're taking this back.
Wow.
Because they didn't want to show on their FTD that they had a closure.
Yep.
Is that common?
This is common. So if we do keep this on, this is like a good fact for anyone looking at buying a franchise business. There's the item 20 in the FTD, and that shows how many stores have been opened that year, closed that year, and then transferred that year. So what sophisticated franchisors do that want to hide closures is they transfer them to either themselves as a corporately run location, or they convince another franchisee to buy it, or a new person coming in to buy that existing.
Up on that?
So if you look at transfers and there's a high number of them, almost look at a transfer as a closure. Like, what happened here? Why did you
really? It should be looked at that.
I would, if I'm looking at a concept, like, why did they all of a sudden have 10 transfers last year and 40 this year? Like, that's not normal for a system this early in its life.
Yeah.
If it's sub 5, sub 10 years and they have a ton of transfers, why are this many people getting out? If it's going well, they're just going to,
really dangerous.
they just hold on.
Yeah.
So closures and transfers are the numbers. Like, obviously closures are more obvious.
Yeah.
Transfers are a way to hide closures.
Yeah.
More often than not, unless it's a really mature brand and they just have, like Wendy's as an example, their average age of their franchisee is 64 years old. Average. And so it's just an older brand, older system. A lot of those individuals don't have succession plans. So Wendy's is looking to sell like 700 in some locations in the next, I think it's 10 to 12 months.
Wow.
It's a lot fast.
Jeez.
It's like they are going to have a lot of transfers. That doesn't mean necessarily that Wendy's is failing, and it's still a good brand. And yes, they have competition across all the other big burger players. But that's an example where it's a mature system where transfers maybe just make a little bit more sense based on the life cycle of where they are.
Gotcha. So that's something to look out for is transfers.
Item 20, transfers.
19, finance stuff, 20 transfers. Yeah, it was sad because I heard this story because he had to sell his house. He had to sell his house. My friend bought it, and now they have to rent it. They rent it back from him. And I don't even think they had to declare bankruptcy because of the franchise. I think they were having other issues, but it was just a double doozy because no one ever knew that happened on the FTD, but he kind of got screwed. But just like run it through ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Like ChatGPT could have totally seen that before he emailed that in writing to the franchise.
Well, that's the problem I have. I think I used to be a pretty big franchise skeptic for this reason. I hear all these horror stories. We've all heard tons of them. But I also have a ton of friends who have started independent businesses or bought independent businesses and have horror stories. It wasn't until I started really looking under the hood to see that, all right, franchising is still small business. It's just a business model on top of a bunch of different industries, health and wellness, hospitality, food, etc.
Yep.
And franchising has a 85-ish% success rate after a 5-year period. It's 50% for independent businesses. So after 5 years, half of independent businesses are shutting down. Franchising,
you got a better shot.
So you have a better shot, but you're still gonna hear these horror stories of the the 15 or so that shut 15% that shut down. They lost everything. They declared bankruptcy. And I think it's almost like these outlier cases are louder. You hear about them more because of the way they happened. This is what gives franchising a bad rep. Is it's this kind of shady character, this brand that wasn't being a good partner.
Yeah.
They were trying to do these transfers, and so you just need to identify those and find ways to flag them, just like you would buying a house looking for structural issues or mold or whatever else. There just isn't as many guardrails and protections as there should be. I'm usually not a huge advocate for regulation. This is an area where I'm like, why has the government not stepped in and said, hey, when you buy a house, you have to, if you use a real estate agent, they're licensed in that state. They have to disclose how much money they make and when.
Yeah.
But in franchising, it's the Wild West. The broker
And it's
doesn't
a bigger
have
financial decision.
Yeah, with less collateral backing. At least the house, you have the asset backing it. This, you could be buying a lease in a strip center that you've put $200 to $300K into renovating the space, and if the business doesn't work, there's no recourse. And that's the issue here. I think that's why, again, franchising gets a bad rep, and that's why we're building this platform and on this mission to go educate people on what to look for and give you the data to make the best decision for you and your family or your business partner that you can.
Yeah. Please, I need you. I need you to send me your stories. If you or someone you know made thousands of dollars in a short period of time with a business, a side hustle, a growth hack, I don't care what it is. I want you on this podcast to give you free publicity and to help grow my podcast. So if that's you, go to tkoyes.com, fill out the form. If it's a friend of yours, send them tkoyes.com, have them enter your name, and I'll give you $1,000 for the referral. That's tkoyes.com. If someone is like dead set on Jersey Mike's, and they're like, I want to own a Jersey Mike's, and they could choose between buying into it, buying a territory, starting from scratch, or they go to Biz Buy Sell and see a Jersey Mike's for sale that profits $70K a year, selling for $200,000. If they are dead set on Jersey Mike's, what's a better option for them, would you say?
If I can get into an existing one for a deal because the operator is tired or burned out, or you mentioned earlier, like I own 10 of them, and this one happens to be a 2-hour drive time from my closest store. So my GM is driving out 3 days a week and it's a headache. And they're kind of willing to let it go because it's a headache. Those are always the best outcomes because you're not having to now build millions of dollars in equipment. You're paying a multiple on cash flow instead.
Yeah.
And so they likely lost a little bit or broke even. I'm making up for that. Like I get the other side of that zero-sum game. I'm getting the benefit of not having to go build a brand new building or renovate a whole new site. And so I would rather, in a restaurant specifically, I'd rather buy existing if I can.
But it sounds like your upside might be a little capped.
Yeah.
It's already known. Unless they're really screwing it up and you have a way of not screwing it up, it feels like the downside to that option is your upside is more known, more fixed. But your risk is less.
Well, and do I own another portfolio of similar concepts in the area and it's easier for me to just plug it right in? Is it the first one I'm buying?
All right. What other concepts are interesting to you right now?
Yeah, so the last one is a fuel delivery franchise. And so they also do DEF, which is diesel exhaust fuel or fluid. And they'll go to these large, long haul trucking businesses, also local logistics as well, and they'll replace fuel and DEF on site so that you don't have to make another stop with both your trucks, but also your heavy machinery. So they're fueling up your bobcats and other tools that you have, and that's the franchise that they're delivering you fuel and doing it on site.
Do they do consumer stuff at all?
This one specifically is commercial. It's all B2B again. And it's all mobile.
So they only do like B2B stuff exclusively?
Yeah, B2B, mostly fleets.
Do they boats at all?
I don't think they do boats. I didn't see anything about boats. It's all been in yards and refuels for vehicles and equipment on site.
Okay. So what are the numbers on this one?
Yep. So this one is pretty interesting. The average revenue is just under 5 million.
Wow.
But the margins are a little bit lower because I think we're back into that kind of GMV territory.
Oh, and this is fuel too.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are the margins? So 5 million gross revenue.
They're walking away with a little over $1 million in gross profit.
Okay, which is a little misleading. It's not like the overhead is 4 million. It's the gas. Like the margin on gas is low. So $1 million in gross profit. Do you know what net is?
I don't have net. A lot of franchises are weary of posting that in their item 19.
Is there any upside for that? I mean, if it's really good, there's upside, right?
Yeah, so I look for that too. Like if it's a new brand, they try not to show just because it's small data. And then if it's a more mature brand, you do see it a lot. And if they don't show it and they're mature, over 50 units, and they don't show it, there's usually some sort of red flag. And I would at least ask, why are you guys not showing it? They might have had a bottom 10% that just really dragged down the average.
Yeah.
And similar to publicly traded companies in their, what's the quarterly filing?
The S9 or S1.
S10, yeah, what S1.
Yeah.
Similar to publicly traded companies, you'll see all sorts of adjusted EBITDA and made up metrics that you just read the footnotes and be smart about. Plug them into Chat or Claude and just make sure that you're peeling the layer of the onion back.
Okay, let's talk startup cost for all 4 of these concepts. And then we'll just cover them real quickly again. So number 1 was freight brokerage.
Yep.
How much does it cost to get involved, and how much of that cost can you finance?
Yep. So the freight brokerage one, because you're doing it at your home, small office, small team, it's mostly you, B2B sales. It's $75,000 to $193,000.
How much of that is the upfront fee to the franchisor?
So the franchise fee is typically $35,000 to $60,000 depending on the brand. For these guys specifically, it's about $50,000.
Okay, and the rest is
technology, software fee, training. They also are required in the FDD to put 3 months of working capital. Okay. So a lot of times that range is including 3 months of cash.
There's probably a minimum too, like 3 months of working capital or $30,000.
Well, so they're required in the FDD, the franchise disclosure document, in the item 7. That's your startup cost section.
So whatever that number is.
They're legally required to show 3 months of working capital. I tell people double or triple that. You probably need 6 to 9 months of working capital. Yeah. And that's true for any business, franchise or not. You should have enough for a rainy day and it to take longer to get to profitability. They're just, for whatever reason, the FTC said 3 months is the number you are required to show.
Okay. So call it 125 would be the middle, the median between those two numbers. How much of that can you finance, and how do you
finance? 90% through SBA loans on the high. Like that's the best you're going to get. Realistically, probably 70 to 80% can be financed. You need to come with 10 to 30% of these numbers. So if it's, let's say 125, you need to come with
25
yeah.
grand.
Yep.
And could you borrow that from friends and family if you needed to?
Yep.
And I mean, the SBA process is probably a little annoying, right?
I've done a few. So I used to own a number of laundromats, and I remember all the horror stories of SBA. You have to, give blood, give a blood sample and everything else. And it honestly wasn't that bad. They make you fill out a personal financial statement, a PFS.
Which you do that if you buy a house.
You're doing it anyway. And once you do it once, you have all the information. Like the annoying part is doing one of those personal financial statements because you're having to find accounts and over here and brokerage statements and retirement stuff. And that part's a little annoying, especially if you own other businesses. You have to start pulling some of that stuff too.
Yeah.
But once you do it one time, you can go shop at 20 banks and find the right partner and the right rates. And
guys, tkowners.com. That's my community where people are building businesses. I do AMAs, Q&As every week live. You can ask me anything you want. You can have accountability partners. It's about 1,000 people in there building, starting, growing businesses. Check out TKO, as in the Kerner office, tkowners.com.
I even had the individual I mentioned that owns 120 locations. He told me recently, because he's a pop-up franchisee as well, he's like, look, I'll even entertain SBA still at times. He's like, it's a necessary evil.
Yeah.
He's like, it's a good source of cash. It's a good source of capital. You can borrow up to $5 million in aggregate. I think they actually increased the limits recently. And then there's an SBA Express loan where you can get $500,000 in less than 60 days.
Wow. So you could use that for this.
And you can keep doing it after the 60 days is up. You can do it again for another location.
Up to 5 million again?
Up to $500,000 per SBA Express loan. So yeah, you could use that for all of this or most of this. And then 5 million is the aggregate. So yeah, you can do 10 territories, 10 locations.
Wow. Okay. And yeah, I used to think 5 million was like you had to buy one business and you might as well get as much close to 5 million as you can, but you could do that across multiple businesses.
Multiple loans.
It's like a line of credit, basically.
Yep.
And when applying the first time is the hardest part. And then after that, they probably just want updated statements, right?
And the brand too, this is also a caveat, the brand has to be on the SBA registry, which most franchisors do because they understand
they want more franchisees
are going to be doing this.
Yeah.
Yep.
Outside of SBA, the other options for financing this are friends and family. And are there any other like conventional bank loans or options out there?
Depending on your personal standing, if you have enough collateral and assets, you can get conventional loans. Like we're entertaining conventional loans for the pop-ups we're developing. Mm-hmm. They might come with a personal guarantee. They might be more relaxed and just require a corporate guarantee. It depends on the health of the franchise system as well. And banks love franchising because there's 100 units or 50 units or even 20 units of this same business out there today that they have data on and financials on that make them feel better versus Chris and Alex's bagel shop that we're doing for the first time. And they're like, what is, what, how do you know this pro forma is right and that this will actually do this?
Yeah.
So franchising again is de-risked statistically, shown, but from a bank's perspective, also de-risked because they have way more data and locations to look at.
So for freight brokerage, if the range is 75 to 150, then theoretically, if you finance 90% of the 75, very, very base case is 7,500 cash in, which you could borrow from friends and family, up to like 30, 40
Yep.
cash in, which you could borrow from friends and family. What was the next one again?
The next one was the facility management, where you're effectively a GC managing 20 subs to go
Yeah.
do cleaning, landscaping, HVAC maintenance, etc. This is one that has very high revenues. The total range that they have is 229,000 up to 410,000.
Okay. So again, 29 to 100K cash from you or friends and family, and finance the rest with SBA.
Yep. So sub 6 figures to get into this if you borrow money.
Okay. And then
The third one was oil filtration, and that because you have trucks. Again, you can start with one, so this range is smaller. It's as soon as you start with one, 140,000 to 163,000.
okay. So 15 to 50K, give or take.
Yep.
And then
The last
Fuel delivery.
one was fuel delivery is 172,000 to 490,000.
okay. So 17 to 150 to 200K.
Yep.
Okay. What would you say is the cheapest franchise concept that you would put your own money into right now?
So the cheapest, and I don't know if I would personally run it, but I would do it with a kid or maybe a spouse, or find a high school kid that would want to do it with me and they could learn entrepreneurship through it. But it's Card My Yard is the brand, and it's $10,000 to get into it. So very cheap. And it's these yard signs that are like, "Happy birthday,
I've
Chris,"
seen 'em.
or "Congratulations." And
It's like the most quintessential suburb activity.
yes,
world.
so easy. It's almost like the modern paperboy route, I would
Yeah.
say. And you can make 30-ish grand a year doing that.
Wow.
So it's like a nice little side hustle. It could be fun to like work with, again, son, daughter on it, and relatively low risk, low investment.
Part-time. If I handed you 150 grand right now, what franchise would you buy into today?
So one that I really like that 150K would allow me to do is this garage renovation business. They do like epoxied floors, custom shelving with slat board and stuff. The average revenue is over $1 million. No heavy equipment. It's just a team of 2 or 3 individuals coming to pour the epoxy and hang shelving.
Yep.
And Damon John from Shark Tank
Yeah.
recently used this company and was on Instagram talking. They did such a fantastic job. So the brand is great, the quality is great, the revenues are fantastic, and the overhead is pretty small. And I like services businesses because you can get going in less than 30 days.
Okay.
I like to go fast.
Yeah, I actually interviewed an epoxy flooring guy right there a couple months ago. He doesn't own a franchise, but he does really well. So again, a franchise is a great option if you want a little more handholding, a little more support. What is the most boring franchise that quietly makes people rich?
The one that comes to mind is brands that do accessibility infrastructure for seniors. So like they're coming and putting ramps into your home. They're putting those like
Seen 'em.
kind of elevator-ish
Yep.
things that go up your stairs. And the baby boomers, or this aging population, we have 10,000 people, I think, a day turning 65 or older. It's a ton of people. And we'll do like random market surveys where we call into Philadelphia or Cincinnati and we act as though we have a parent that's aging and we want to put them into a facility or see if there's in-home care available. Every city we call doing this, wait list, 6 months, 12 months, every city. So like there's clearly a ton of demand and not a lot of supply. But I like the idea of building the infrastructure versus the care itself.
Yeah.
It's because there's less liability, there's less labor I have to manage. You come in, you build a infrastructure and you're out. So I don't know if that's boring or not. It kind of is. You're building like ramps. I don't know. And they do millions of dollars. Some of these franchisees, and one of the brands I'm thinking of is 10 million plus a year in revenue.
Wow.
Very good margin.
It's funny because I have a phrase for this type of business and it matches perfectly that type of business is I call them grandparent businesses where, why is being a grandparent better than being a parent? Because you come in, you see the kids, you play with them, they're happy, you sugar them up, they need a nap, then you bounce, right? That's a grandparent business. This is literally a grandparent business where you're not managing them. You're coming in, you put a handrail next to the toilet, $1,000, I'm out, right?
The insurance pays for it in many cases. So
Yeah. So there's like no payer. Like that's another brilliant business model is like the incentives are aligned.
And it feels good. Like I talk to some of these franchisees in these exact businesses, and they genuinely feel very good about what they do. They're very mission driven. They're like, I made a huge difference in someone's life and in a family's life. They now get to stay in their home X years longer because of what I did.
If you or someone you know went to ChatGPT and said, make me money, and then it did, I want to hear from you. I want to have you on my podcast to hear your story. If it's you, great. You'll get free publicity. If it's your friend, great. I'll give you $1,000 for sending your friend Send them to tkoyes.com and fill out the form, and we'll have you on the podcast. Why are franchise owners failing today, even if they have a great system and a great playbook?
I say the wrong person in the right franchise is still the wrong franchise.
Okay.
And that's because their background doesn't align with it. Their risk tolerance doesn't align with it. It's like you take this ex-military guy who's great with running a squad of people, but doesn't want to stand in front of a room of 500. And maybe is more shy, but is good with a smaller group. He's probably not going to want to do like door-to-door sales or like get behind a computer all day and on a phone selling you freight brokerage.
Yeah.
Probably be terrible at that. Versus the person who very outgoing, life of the party, loves to win, is good at convincing and persuading people. Probably good at both of those things, but better at home selling freight brokerage.
Yeah.
And so it's really the fit. This is all about fit, I've realized, and our whole platform and our whole goal is get people into the right thing, not the one that makes the most money, not the one that it's, because that's how you have to persevere and do the work. And if you suck at the work or you hate the work, you're not going to persevere and you're going to fail. As soon as you're out of the game, you're out. If you stay in it and work hard enough and long enough, you're going to have some level of success.
Well, that's why you could take two amazing humans, put them together, they get married, and it becomes a toxic relationship because they're just bad for each other.
Yes.
And with other people, they'd be perfect. Is Subway the worst franchise deal in America? Defend your answer.
I think today, absolutely. So a little inside information. We interviewed someone at my last company who was a franchise business coach for Subway. So every brand has these coaches that help franchisees, and they're assigned to 10 of them a month or whatever. And she had told me, she's like, I was like, why are you leaving? And why do you want to come work with us? She's like, it's just becoming too cannibalistic and toxic. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, we're at a point where we're opening stores now, a block or two away from another. And the goal is to like, let them fight it out, and we'll take the best one and we'll close the other one. And I'm like, that's someone's life again, investing in stores and renovations. Like they're knowingly doing that as part of their strategy.
And if they survive, some of those owners are taking home 20 grand a year, 30 grand a year.
Yeah. I think it's terrible. There's way better options. At one point it was probably exciting and all the rage and rave. And if you got in early, probably could open 100 stores and have made a lot of money, but at what cost and what expense? And that's where, to me, like, your individual morals and ethics, you have to decide for yourself. Are you fine being very combative and that extreme competitive, or borderline unethical, or not? And I wouldn't be able to.
How are people out there buying franchises with none of their own money?
So the individual I mentioned, he had a background in operating things. And it's like that gave him a unique skill that capital was attracted to, because the capital didn't want to go run a 100-person team or a 200-person team, but this individual was a good operator. And so I'd say if you have a unique skill set where, hey, I can come in and provide something that others don't have. And in this case, if you don't have capital, you need to come with something else. You can't just be like, hey, I have this idea, give me the money, let me go do it. You need to prove or have some level of proven track record to say, hey, I can complement you in a way that you currently don't have today. And most of the time that's operating. And so my advice would be go get some level of operational experience. It's why I tell people, and like, of course, we want people to buy businesses and be entrepreneurial, whether it's franchising or not. But if your goal is to own and build multiple businesses, you just need to get in the game, whether it's a side hustle, the card in my yard thing, or freight brokerage,
or just having a job. Like an operator doesn't have to be an entrepreneur.
No.
Just being proven at your job.
Like I'll give you a real life example now. Like for Pop-Up, we're developing 10. Dan and I have a number of other things going on, so we're busy. We have capital. We can operate, but we can't operate 5 things at the same time. And so we brought an operating partner on who, to your point, hasn't necessarily been the owner on the other side before, but she has operated multiple businesses, multiple locations as like a GM, as a district manager. But now we've given her equity upside, pretty meaningful equity that she might not have had anywhere else or otherwise, that she, if she does well here the next 3 to 5 years, will be able to parlay that into, now I own half, 60, 70%, and I'm attracting the capital to go do my own thing. But she's having to earn that right these next 3 to 5 years in this kind of first meaningful way that she hasn't had a chance to do before.
Gotcha.
So it's going to take that person longer, but it's possible.
Yeah. When you're looking at a franchise document, what is a red flag that makes you run away every time?
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but the closures and the transfers, especially if they're trying to hide things, or if the item 19 doesn't have profitability or footnotes that are clearly made up. Like, oh, this revenue is just the top 10 locations. Like, why aren't you showing the other, not even 90%, but the other 95% because you're only showing the 10 absolute best. Why? Or if this isn't in the document necessarily, but if the brand is cagey about introducing me to other franchisees, like let me talk to some that have failed, let me talk to some that are performing well, let me talk to some that are middle of the road, because I need to know what's happening here in the system behind closed doors, under the hood. And the best way to learn is to talk to people actually doing it.
Do you ever say like, because if I'm a prospective franchisee, I don't want to say, hey, give me some names of some people I can call. I want to say, I want to see all of your franchisees and I'm going to pick a few.
I'm in a secret shop. Yeah, you should. Just like if you were interviewing someone for a job, you hey, give me your references, Chris, and you're going to give me your best, your best friend, your wife, and versus if you give me those. But then what I do during the interviews, I say, Chris, everywhere you've worked, who was your boss there? What would they say of you? How do you spell their name? Because then
their phone number?
Then I go find them and I do talk to them, and especially if it was one that was not on your list. And so same thing here. If you're looking at a franchise, they're going to give you the 3 that are the best performing people probably. And then you need to go, it's your job in your diligence process, and we'll help you with this if you want to work with us. Go find the other franchisees that filed bankruptcy or aren't in the system anymore. And there's ways to do this. There's ways to find this information and go talk to them.
Yeah. Now, if people do want to work with you, what do they do? How do they find you?
The easiest thing is to go to franzy.com, FRANZY.com. And then we put out a ton of content as well. We have a podcast called The Exit Plan, which is individuals sharing their stories of leaving corporate America to go become a business owner, franchise or not, as well as people that have built large portfolios and have exited them to private equity or other large operators. So we tell those stories. And then Alex from Franzy on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, etc.
And we'll link to all those places. Anything else you need to share, Alex, that we might have missed?
I think we covered a lot. I appreciate you having us on. And again, I think franchising is probably the most overlooked path to wealth creation in America. And we're on a mission to help put a spotlight on that.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
If you like this content, please share with a friend, hit a like or a comment below, and we'll see you next time on The Kerner Office.